What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the College Football 2024 Betting Kickoff Show, Part 1. I'm Stuckey, and joining me today, as always, is my BBOC co-host, Colin Wilson, and also the one and only Mr. Brett McMurphy. It is good to be back, gentlemen. I'm sure everyone is getting excited, hearing the intro for the first time probably in a while. The kick is blocked. I was just watching a clip of that App State upset today. Brett, do you remember where you were for that game?
I should, but I don't. But yeah, one of the most iconic games of all time, no doubt.
So apparently that was the first game ever on Big Ten Network.
Yeah, it definitely was. Absolutely was.
And a lot of people, there was like it was a mess with like rights and people. A lot of people in Michigan couldn't even watch it. Fun trivia question: the the player who blocked the field goal was Corey Lynch, and he's the all-time leader in college football in passes defended. Still to this day, won 3 national championships. Was drafted by the Bengals. Played a couple years in the NFL. Iconic game. And that just gets my juices flowing. I cannot wait for college football to get here. And by the way, the thing that people forget about that game is App State kicked a field goal to take the lead with 30 seconds left. They could have run the clock out for 1 second, but they panicked because they had no timeouts, and they gave the ball back to Michigan, who hit a bomb. And then that could have never happened because of clock mismanagement. What's up, Mario Cristobal? I'm sure we'll be talking about him and Miami coming up. Colin, do you remember where you were and what's going on, brother? It's good to be back.
It's good to see you, brother. Yeah, I was drinking, getting ready for my own Razorback football game. I mean, if you think you're having tough as a Michigan fan having to watch App State, let me introduce you to Toledo coming to my house or the Citadel coming to my house. I mean, listen, we didn't have SEC Network back then, but I've been there, Michigan fans. It's quite embarrassing.
Yeah, well, I think Michigan fans now, they're a little more accepting of that, bring that game up because they are the defending national champions, of course. But before we dive in here to our kickoff episode, part 2, by the way, is out right now, so you can listen to that when you're done listening to this. And the group of 5 guys, Mike Calabrese and Mike Iannella, they'll have their group of 5 kickoff episode next Monday with Brett as well. So make sure you check that out. And also, this is the time that it really helps if you subscribe, subscribe, leave a review, a 5-star review. I'll do a bunch of aggressive giveaways. So I can do some cash giveaways. Just ramping the pod back up does really help us out. So appreciate that. And then, of course, we'll have conference-specific betting previews for every conference. I'll tweet out the exact schedule, but starting at the end of July through August. So make sure you check each and every one of those out. And then before you know it, the season will be here. Gentlemen, before we dive into some business at hand, Brett, I'll start with you. How's your summer going? Any trips? How's the kind of a little bit of the downtime going?
Yeah, it's been going good. Starting to get into the heart of the conference media days. Yes, cash your tickets. I played another round of golf with Colin, and I've still never lost have never lost to Colin in a round of golf. Also, you guys.
How many strokes? How many strokes you win by?
I think it was 4 or 5, and I won a press, and then we tied on a third one. So I won 2 of the 3 wagers with 1 push.
Well, you say you never lost. This is a betting show. Are you going to start giving him strokes?
You know what he's not going to tell you? He's not going to tell you about how I had a 7-stroke lead in every single one of these matches, and then I get fatigued.
Nobody cares. Nobody cares if you run the opening kickoff back and then you lose by 4 touchdowns. Okay, nobody cares. They want the finals, Colin. They want the finals. You didn't play first quarter. You didn't play first 9. It was the whole 18 holes.
I'm a great first half wager, just like Hawaii and Timmy Chang at Vanderbilt.
Exactly. Hey, guys, you guys don't even know I'm going to say this, and it's funny. So over the summer, you guys know I live in Tampa. My family drove down to Sarasota, hung out for a few days. I go to sit down at the pool, and this guy says, Brett. And I look over, And he goes, "Are you Brett McMurphy?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "You do the big bets on campus with Stuckey and Colin." I'm like, oh my God. So shout out to David Dyer. Please email Matt Mitchell. Matt, give out the address to get. I told David I would get him some gear. So provide him that. So yeah, it's funny. I know, Stuckey, last year you took some grief because I think 40 and Wetzel recognized you on their podcast as Stuckey's the guy that works with Brett. So this time he's like, "Hey, are you the guy that does the pod with Stuckey and Colin?" So we are nationwide, or at least for people that vacation in beautiful sunny Sarasota, Florida.
Love to hear it. Yeah, Mitchell, give out your email address so we can get him some gear. Colin, how's your summer going? Any trips besides the golf losing?
I mean, it was a pretty short summer. I mean, I had some time with some family, but we got to go up. Action Network as a collective, me and our editor Pete Rudin got to go up to the College World Series and spend a whole weekend up there watching, everything, and then interviewing college football fan bases on the drunken streets of Mike Fahey. There is just one of the most tremendous things. I don't think there's ever going to be a perfect marriage in the world than Stuckey hanging out in Rocco's where all the Jello shots are being served. I'm convinced, and I told the owner of the bar, I'm like, I have the perfect guy to come in here and really just run a show and run the bar and for 2 weeks. So we'll see if we can get that set up. But yeah, it was a quick summer, but it's been it's been sports filled. Listen, I've got 3 teenagers going into their final year of high school, so I'm trying to soak it all in before I'm an empty nester. But it's been a blast, and I'm telling you, the College World Series, I think that's probably going to be a staple of the company for years to come.
Love it. Yeah, myself, I kind of cut back on the daily baseball grind. Prepping college football and college basketball. I got to put more time into college basketball. It's not as easy as it was, and the transfer portal. So I'm going through all those. A couple trips coming up. I'm going to Paris for the Olympics and then hitting south of France. And then I'm doing Vegas for my birthday. But first we're going out to we always go out to a couple national parks before Vegas. Going to Yosemite, Death Valley, Kings Canyon, stopping in Mammoth Lakes. I think the hardest thing about going to a national park, they're really cool, but the food, you can't find good food. So if anyone has any restaurant recommendations and like on the way any of those places or at those places, please let me know via Twitter. But other than that, just fully immersed in college football, deep diving every team. The MAC manifesto will be here before we know it. But let's get into the 2024 college football season. A lot of changes. Just mentioned a lot of the changes, and this is a season that's going to look a lot different. Brett, I'll throw it to you. Do you want to just explain to those that aren't in the know and or living under a rock what the new college football playoff format will look like?
Yeah, well, everybody I'm sure knows that it will be 12 teams. The biggest difference, and fans are going to freak out, they'll probably forget, but then when they see the seedings, the top 4 teams in the final seedings will be the highest ranked conference champions. So if those conference champions rank 2, 7, 24, or 90, they will be seeded 1 through 4. Notre Dame could go 12-0 and be ranked number 1 every week by the selection committee. The highest they can be is a 5 seed because they are not in a conference. So, we'll talk about this more when we get into the season, but I think what's going to be fascinating is if there's a team that can get into the playoffs that does not have to play a conference championship game, most likely an SEC or Big Ten team, which it'll be a third team from those leagues, I think they're going to have a huge advantage because they have the week off of the conference championship game. They get a rest, and more than likely they would host a first-round game. So, we'll dissect that and break it down. But that's the main thing. And keep in mind, this is only for the next 2 years. We don't know what's going to happen in 2026. They haven't officially said. It could be 12 teams. It could be 14. It could be 16. Personally, from the people I've talked to, I think it goes to 14. But I think it's going to be great, guys, because when we get into the back half of the season, instead of 5 teams in the running for 4 spots, we're literally going to have maybe 36 teams in the running, because you take in all the teams that have a chance to get in as the group of 5's highest rated champion, and then teams that are in the running for at large bids if they don't win their conference among the 4 power leagues.
Yep. Yeah, have home college football playoff games. You have 4 buys. Important. It's a really important note that you mentioned. Could even leak into Heisman, but especially for futures, right? There's a good chance the Big 12 or the ACC champ is not, in the top 4. Like the chances that its SEC champ is 1, Big 12 champ is 2, et cetera, slim to none, right? So probably you're going to have a team that's ranked higher that doesn't get the bye. So that's really important to keep in mind. As of right now, there are 8 teams that are favored or even money to make the playoff. Ohio State, Georgia, overwhelming favorites. Oregon, Texas, and Notre Dame, Penn State, Ole Miss, Alabama around even money. Colin, any thoughts on the new format? One thing I will say before I throw it to you is people complaining like, oh, wait, why are we going to 12 teams? Who cares? These are the games. There's going to be more great college football games. We're going to bet on them. And I think it's going to be exciting. And I actually think, look, maybe not every single game means as much to the top teams, but there's going to be more meaningful games in aggregate. So, look, and if you do 10, if you do 8, you're always going to argue who should be the 8th, and then who should be the 10th, who should be the 12th. If there was BCS, you'd be like, well, this team should be set. There's always going to be an argument there. I don't care. Give me the games. Give me the excitement. And also, give me the conference. Every conference championship game means something. And we don't have that long break anymore of just, we don't get the meaningful games. Now, December is going to be epic. Colin, thoughts?
Yeah, my Twitter absolutely blew up when new executive director Rich Clark, he's a general from the Air Force, by the way. He took the stage in Las Vegas and explained to everybody what's going to go into the teams, the 4 teams that are going to host in their cities. He mentioned that things that go into it that they're trying to get campuses prepared for is hotel availability, ticket sales, practice facilities, and weather. Now, when I tweeted that out, that tweet went bonkers. A lot of negativity coming in there for people in the Big Ten saying that we'll never get to host a game. And I think really what Rich Clark was trying to say was we're working with teams already. And I asked him in a sidebar, let's take Notre Dame, for instance. Maybe they don't have the hotels in South Bend to house 100,000 people that would travel into the city to be ready for that. Was there a contingency for them? And I'm just saying in general, this is not specific to Notre Dame. Would you potentially move them to Chicago to play in Soldier Field? He said, yes, every single school that we're in contact with and trying to get them ready will have a backup contingency plan. So I think for everybody that's kind of freaking out, like, Michigan State maybe gets into the playoff. You think of a Power 4 school that has a small setting like a Green Bay Packers type thing, and do they have the infrastructure to host? They're working with those schools to try to get everything ready. I don't think you're going to get your seed spot stolen. I don't think they're going to flop, say, let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8 to get to host. I don't think they're going to flop 8 and 9 because of the cities. But it is a monster hot topic. And, I think it's just one of those things where if the Charlotte 49ers make it, you're not going to send an entire college football playoff game, to their 20,000 seat stadium. It's not going to happen, but they're thinking about it. They're informing teams about it, and they're trying to get infrastructure ready. And I think they need to be more transparent about who gets those 4 teams and why, because there's a lot of Big Ten folks or just people that support teams in the North that think that they're going to get screwed out of hosting a spot because they're not in the SEC. So that is on the horizon, and it's going to be a monster topic of conversation.
Yeah. I think also the other thing that makes the new format the most exciting, to me at least, is from a betting and content perspective for this podcast, to make the college football playoff market. I don't think there's a ton of value out there right now, but on a week-to-week basis, trying to price that, find opportunities after losses, and that's going to be fascinating all year long, especially in the first year. So I'm excited to dive into that market all year long. And something that I don't think we mentioned is the highest ranked group of 5 champion will automatically get a place as well. There also is a new team. We have a new team in FBS, Kennesaw State, who did not beat a FCS or FBS team last year. They went 3-6. They beat like teams like Tusculum, Lincoln. They did redshirt a bunch of guys, and they only played 9 games. Their quarterback situation extremely dicey. Their starter went 0-6 in his only start last year against Lincoln, California. Their backup is the coach's son, who didn't even win a full-time starting job in high school. So things could get ugly for Kennesaw State. Will it go like Sam Houston, a little rough, or will it go like Jacksonville State, who had a very successful first year, along with some others over the years? There's been a lot of hit or misses with those teams making the transition in the first year, but keep that in mind. A new team, Kennesaw State, group of 5 guys. We'll have a lot more on that, and we will cover them in the conference previews as well. I do like under 2.5, by the way.
You know what's sad? Sad stuff? They left the triple option a couple of years ago. They went to a spread. I'm so upset about it.
Yeah, I think they should go back to the triple option this year. They went to like a spread option last year, and they said that, hey, we think we have the quarterbacks to throw it some more. We know we're making the transition. I don't think they have the quarterbacks. And look, I don't think they have the talent yet either. And the triple option, a unique scheme, that's kind of how you can compete. Look at the service academies. So I think they should have stuck with it, but we'll see how it works out. By the way, we'll talk some high level futures, maybe some early win totals we like in part 2. So again, make sure you check that out. Of course, the other big offseason news was conference realignment. You look at the conferences now, they're going to look a lot different. They have been changing a lot, but we have some drastic changes. The Pac-12 dispersed all over the place. And now we just have the Pac-2, just kind of like a quasi Mountain West 2-team conference of Oregon State and Washington State. And the rest of the Pac-12 is dispersed throughout the country. Colin, any thoughts on how that's going to work out? Like some of these Big Ten teams some of these ex-Pac-12 teams going to the Big Ten. You have some going to the ACC, more travel, different style of football in a way. Any early thoughts there?
Yeah, well, first off, the Pac-12 is now just 2 teams, and everybody in Las Vegas called them the Tupac. So they will now be referred to as Tupac out of Las Vegas. They had themselves a very healthy drinking night this past week. I think for me, the Big 12 is not going to produce a national championship contender. To me, it's the most fascinating and exciting league out there by far. Brett Yormark calls the 4 corners. We got the 4 corners from UCF, Arizona State, Arizona. They absolutely are going to be highly competitive. Half the league can win the conference. Different styles of offenses everywhere. You've got the Malzahn Wildcat, the Willie Fritz Diamond Triple in space, and you've got the heavy rushing attack at Kansas State. I think from a TV viewing point of view, the Big 12 might be the most fun thing to watch. I mean, to me, that's more entertaining than seeing these Pac-12 teams try to play in Big 10 cold. That's just going to be like Miami trying to play in the Pinstripe Bowl. And so I think realignment's done, but I'll let Brett speak because I'm not sure. I think there's one team in the ACC that is still looking to break that contract out there. But I think the Big 12 is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's maybe 7 or 8 teams, as you alluded to, that if you told me they ended up winning the Big 12, I wouldn't be completely shocked, right? And if you said that about the SEC, like 8 teams, there's only a couple that you think can really win it. Same with the Big 10. So yeah, it's definitely wide open. Can't wait for that episode to dig into some futures. You mentioned the ACC. Stanford going to the ACC is going to be interesting. They're one of only 2 teams that plays 5 teams off of a bye, and they're out on the West Coast playing in the ACC. Might be a little rough, but you hinted at this as well. ACC, Clemson, I think they just lost. They're suing the conference. I think they just lost, and they're appealing to the Supreme Court in Carolina now. They're trying to get out of a TV rights deal, them in Florida State, which I think locks them into like 2036. Brett, do you have any insight, any inkling of what's going to happen there?
Well, Florida State is suing to get out of the league, and that is their intention. The ACC, though, is taking a page out of former North Carolina coach Dean Smith's playbook in that they are trying to run the four corners offense. The ACC is trying to stall all of these lawsuits, trying to stall all of these judgments as long as they can, because they know ultimately once Florida State is given a number to get out, then they're going to try to get out. Clemson will also. The biggest question, though, is if Florida State can get out, but it's going to cost them $100 or $200 million or what, that kind of big number, it's very doubtful that other schools will also try to get out of the league. However, if Florida State can find a path out with, you mentioned there's multiple lawsuits going on right now. We have to see where that goes. It's impossible to predict who will win those. But if these lawsuits, if they rule that Florida State can get out of the ACC and, basically rule that the grant of rights is unconstitutional and that it's not binding and they can get out, for basically nothing, then there's going to be a conga line out of the ACC. And if that happens, it is the end of times for college football, because the Big Ten goes to 20 schools minimum. The SEC goes to 20. The Big 12 goes to 20. Then there's no ACC, and it's just like the Pac-12. If only Florida State and Clemson lead the ACC survives. We'll have to see where Florida State and Clemson end up. Obviously, they want to get into the Big Ten. They want to get into the SEC. I'm not so sure that the feeling is receptive from those leagues. But at least we know for the next 2 years that the ACC will remain the way it is.
So we have some stability in the short term, a lot of uncertainty in the long term, in the ever-changing landscape of college football. Along those lines, you also have this new era of NIL and the transfer portal, where teams are changing drastically on a year-to-year basis. People said NIL, the transfer portal, is going to ruin college football and all the best players are going to go to one or two teams. That's not true. But I will say that some of these, lower level, inferior group of five teams are really going to suffer. Look at a team like Ohio and what they lost and where they're headed. Like a team like Temple, you have guys, as soon as they have a good year, might not go to Georgia, but they're gonna go to a better Power 4 school and get a better offer. And those teams are gonna fall behind. They're gonna start reaching into D2, into JUCO more, and then you're gonna see these rosters potentially take a hit if you don't strike gold on a majority of the guys that you bring in. It's gonna make it tough for those teams to really compete with the upper echelon. So I think there is going to be a wider split between the top and the bottom with the new era of the transfer portal and NIL, but it's not going to ruin college football. There's plenty of good players to go around. Just go look at any school. Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin, obviously the transfer portal king. He did it again this year. Colin, any thoughts on the portal this year in general, or if you want to name a specific team or two?
Yeah, I wrote the SEC preview, and this Ole Miss roster is like an all-star game. It is unbelievable the talent that they have at every single position. But I think the question is that going to get yourself to a championship? Because we've been down this path with USC and LSU in previous years where they've absolutely dominated the transfer portal in separate years. And you can portal your way into 10 wins. Both those teams have. Can you portal your way into a conference championship and a playoff push? I mean, really what you should be using the portal for is to build depth, right? That's something Colorado failed on this year. They got better in their starters, but they didn't build any depth whatsoever. Ole Miss is going to have depth, because I go back to the fact that Georgia spanked them by 35 points and they just didn't have the depth. You remember they were trying to run outside zone with Jackson Dart and the tackles were hurt. They had a tackle injury right before the game and it just didn't hold up, and the Georgia defense absolutely ate them alive. So if Ole Miss does, instead of looking at the first string on both offense and defense, maybe we should be grading Ole Miss on what they have in the second string on both sides of the ball, because we have yet to see the portal winner translate into a conference championship.
Yeah. And also NIL, the schools that have a lot of it, that have access to it, and versus teams that don't, that's going to start to make a difference over time as well. And you'll maybe see some programs fall off and some others rise to the top. Brett, trivia question for you. Colin, you can jump in too if you want. Trivia: 8 teams have made a bowl game in 10 plus straight years. Georgia, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Alabama, Clemson, Brett's beloved Oklahoma State, Pokes, Ohio State, and who's the 8th?
It's
Georgia?
Boise State. It's Boise State if you do not penalize them for a game that was canceled because of weather and or COVID.
We are. They didn't go to a bowl in those years.
What about Utah?
They qualified, but they didn't go.
Yeah, not the
I
question.
put an asterisk by them.
Yeah, that's technically correct. I'll give you half a point.
Okay.
Georgia, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Alabama, Clemson, Oklahoma State, and Ohio State.
Yeah, I don't know.
Answer: Memphis, and which is very surprising. 8th team. Something noteworthy with Memphis, the reason I bring that trivia up, is they inked the largest NIL, I believe, the largest NIL corporate sponsorship with FedEx. $25 million, $5 million over 5 years. That's huge, right? You have access to that FedEx money. Colin, NIL, Arkansas, how much of an impact can that have over time? Any thoughts there?
If this was a baseball or basketball podcast, I'd say that it's going pretty great. Arkansas is definitely behind on the NIL from the football standpoint when it compares to the rest of the SEC. And it's really, I mean, some of the coaches I've talked to, it's a give and take. It's players accepting deals but not getting paid. It's players getting paid and then not showing up for their deals. And, I'm close to a couple of businesses here in Northwest Arkansas that have told me certain players that just don't show up after they've signed and got their money. But then again, there's, some of them that are promised things and they don't get them. And it's happening all over college football. I mean, we specifically know that the number one wide receiver a couple of years ago went to USC and he wasn't paid some of the things that he was promised, at least for a while, for a few months. So, NIL is an extremely interesting aspect, and, dollar amounts aren't exactly out there right now, but I think there's not really any rules about whether you get paid or what responsibilities you have once you get paid. Are you cutting commercials? Are you cutting radio spots? Are you simply holding a sign at the front door of the business? It's all, really subjective. And I think the one team to watch out for is Alabama, because Alabama didn't really have any kind of NIL program, no kind of organization, because everybody just wanted to play for Nick Saban. And Alabama's going to have to ramp up their NIL unless Kalen DeBoer can somehow make a national championship game again. And he's like, listen, I've made 2 national championships in a row. Don't really need to lure you guys in with NIL. But, it's important to the teams that are not in the upper tier, and some of them are failing.
Yeah, Penn State potentially could fall behind because of that. I think they saw the top 10 recruiting class for 2025, but just in general over time, it's like in the middle of nowhere, and I don't think they have a huge chest as of right now. It's something to keep an eye on. I bring up Arkansas because we're going to talk some coaches. 29 new head coaches in FBS this year. One of them is Sam Pittman, who wasn't against the spread darling, not in the not so distant past, but I would say he's definitely on the hot seat. Colin, what's he have to do to keep his job? And as an Arkansas fan, do you want him to?
They have 7 games before it's a good one. From a personal level, I've never been more happy to have him as a head coach and representing our state. But this is a gambling podcast. I believe we have 7 games before we get to a bye. We have a bye week before we get to November. And I would say if it's not a 500 record before that November schedule starts, you're going to see interim. Yeah, you're going to see interim Bobby motherfucking Petrino as the new interim head coach for the rest of the season. Now, Pittman, I think a lot of the chatter that usually you don't hear head coaches respond to the chatter that's going on off the field with those losses that we had last year and how bad the offense was going under Dan Enos, who had to be fired. It really took a lot out of Pittman, and he was very open about that in his press conferences. about how it's affecting his players. It's affecting him. He talked about mental health, about, people making fun of his weight, people making fun of some of the kids on his team for the plays that they had. He sounded like a head coach, that when you lose, if you listen to the chatter, it's going to get to you. Now, I think the roster is head and toe above what we had last year. The defense is better. Taylor Green at quarterback is going to be fantastic. And Bobby Petrino running that offense, to me, is going to be worth 3 wins on the schedule alone from above what you think that they had last year. So I think it's an excellent situation. It's really strange because if you just put Pittman in a silo, you'd say this whole thing's going down. You put Petrino in a silo with that offense and you think it's going up. So it's definitely a very weird situation that's going on. But if Arkansas is not at 500 or better before that November bye week, it's over for Pittman. You will have interim Bobby Petrino.
Yeah. I mean, the hope there, we'll talk a lot more about Arkansas in the SEC preview, but the hope there is that Petrino with his play calling prowess gets the offense going, and Pittman can more focus on the offensive line, which is his specialty, but it really fell off, especially last year. They need much better pass protection up front, which will be a key to their season. Brett, any coaches that you want to mention that are clearly on the hot seat that need results? One of them with a really tough schedule, I would assume, is Billy Napier down in
Say his
Gainesville.
name. Say his name.
Say his name.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I was in Destin for the SEC spring meetings and talked to Billy. I talked to Scott Strickland, that's Florida AD, and I asked him, is a win-loss record, are there more important things than a win-loss record? Is that the only way to judge success? And they kind of said, there are more things, but bottom line, you got to win. And yeah, you talk about his schedule. Everybody, if you don't know it, you should have it memorized. Their final 5 games is the hardest stretch ever in the history of college football. Yeah. Georgia, at Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, at Florida State. All of those teams are going to be top 15 preseason. And oh, by the way, they open with Miami. That's going to be top 20. They've got Tennessee. They've got UCF in the middle of all that. That'll be a huge game for the Knights. Yeah, I don't know how he can get to 6. If he should, they should give him the freaking extension, because with that schedule, it's really, really going to be tough. Also, Dave Aranda at Baylor. Colin and I, saw him down up in Vegas at Big 12 media days. And, I think anytime you change your philosophy on offense or defense and do a total 180, which is what he did, and now he's going to be calling the defense. How challenging will that be for a head coach with everything going on? And now you're going to go back to calling defensive plays. I think that's a sign that it's either win or else.
It's like Neil Brown, right? A year ago, we're sitting here. West Virginia has a 4.5 win total. They've been voted as the very last team in the Big 12 poll. And he comes out and says, I'm taking control of the offense and I'm calling the plays. They win 9 games, and now they are definitely in the race to win the Big 12. But Aranda, he's going to call the plays on defense. And I'm not sure that's a great thing for Baylor, because the last time you called defenses, you were at LSU, you called 7 different schemes, personnel. I mean, you were running 2-man fronts, 3-man, 4-man. I mean, it was the craziest playbook that was very complex for some of these kids to grasp. And now you're going to take a Matt Powledge 3-3-5 and you're going to completely make it too complex. And I don't know if these players are going to be ready for that. So Aranda, I think, is the number 1 coach on the hot seat.
One other one I'll throw out to you, Brett, curious on your thoughts here.
Mm-hmm.
A team that has never made the college football playoff, that would have made plenty. I don't know the exact number. I'm doing an exercise now to go through and for futures going back. I don't know how far I'm going to go back, but Penn State. So, this is a team that generally their whole season was 2 games, and they could never get over the hump. James Franklin, 3-17, I believe, against top 10 teams at Penn State. I just could never beat Ohio State. Penn State couldn't beat the top 10 teams. They're favored to go to the college football playoff. Really interesting. Penn State's one of the most intriguing teams in college football, in my opinion, this year, because Drew Aller, He's going to be loved by NFL scouts because of his size, of his arm talent. Can he make the reads? Can he progress in his second year? And I love the offensive coordinator hire, Cignetti from Kansas. What can he bring to that offense? There's still some questions on the offensive line, some defensive pieces. Do they have the receivers to really unlock the potential of that offense? But Franklin, if he doesn't get to the college football playoff this year with his team, his seat start to get hot. I mean, how many years are Penn State fans gonna put up with this? It was always, now it's like a 12 team, so Penn State's got to make it. If they don't, how much more can they put up with it?
Stuck. I understand what you're saying, but no, I don't know. There's no way he's on the hot seat. I mean, he's the last 7 years. He's had 5 double-digit win seasons, not including the COVID year. Never had a losing season at Penn State, except for 4 and 5 during COVID. Yeah, he hasn't won games against Michigan and Ohio State. You said 3 and 17. I didn't know he had won 3, to be honest. But it's kind of like I'm not comparing him to Harbaugh, but Harbaugh for a long time could not beat Ohio State, could not get over the hump, but he still was successful. And then finally he broke through the wall and had some success. So if Penn State goes 8-4 and doesn't get the double-digit wins, yeah, I think there will be some increased heat, but in no way would he be on the hot seat. If we were talking about consecutive seasons, not getting to the college football playoff, and 3 or 4 from the Big Ten are getting in the college football playoff every year, maybe that changes things. But I think he's built up enough equity now, and I understand there may be some frustrations with folks in State College, but I think we're a few years off before Franklin's seat starts warming up.
They got to let Cignetti start calling 3rd and 4th down, 3rd and short, 4th and short. You got to start letting your coordinator. That's what you're paying him for. Quit making the decisions and taking it out of your.
And that's a huge hire. He was incredible with Kansas. Talked to Lance Leipold, and I just wanted to make sure that I was correct on this. But Lance did not call the plays last year, and so that's going to be big for Penn State. They're getting an incredible offensive coordinator. But yeah, Stuck, I understand why there's, fans are frustrated. And will the offense improve? It should, but we'll find out.
We can't leave this segment without asking Stuckey about his backyard for coaches' hot seats, because it's not the hottest. But when you flirt with Texas A&M, I think Mark Stoops made it a tremendous hire on offense. We'll talk about that later, but I don't know. Does he need to produce something better than a 7-win season to get that Texas A&M flirtation out of there?
No. It's football.
No, Stoops can stay. Stoops can stay there until the end of time. He is, he's got the best. He does have literally the best job in America, and that's not being disrespectful to him. I think he's a great coach. What he's done there, compared with the resources he's going up against, he will stay there forever. Heck, they may build him a statue when he's done. Yeah,
there's not the same pressure on the football team here. 7 wins is fine in the SEC. I don't think Franklin's on the hot seat now. If he doesn't make the college football playoff, it could potentially start to warm up a little bit. To close out. You mentioned Harbaugh. I was thinking about this the other day. My memory is a little murky, but do you remember that game, Michigan, when they beat Rutgers in 3 overtimes, 3 years ago? Do you remember that game?
I remember OT versus Rutgers, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it went to 3, but it was in overtime. Michigan was real. If they lost that game, was Harbaugh potentially gone? And then what happens from there? I don't know. Crazy revisionist history thought experiment. But
if you look at the suspension from last year, they would have been fine because they with Sharon Moore at the helm, they were absolutely okay.
Yep. So let's before we close up part 1, we'll do coaches and then coordinators. You can go wherever you want with this. Just mention a coaching hire, head coach we'll start with that you like, hate, are intrigued by, really wherever you want to go with it. I'll start. I'll say I really like Tulane hiring Jon Sumrall from Troy. After they lost Fritz, there's with these group of 5 teams, you lose a really good head coach who had a lot of success. Then you see guys hit the portal. You're at risk of your program just cratering. And I think bringing in Sumrall can, keep them at least on par with where they've been. I thought that was a really good hire. And then Texas A&M. I love Mike Elko. He's always done more with less. Now he has more. And our thoughts on Jimbo Fisher. He had to go. I think it's an enormous upgrade. I love his staff. I think Texas A&M has a lot of potential with Elko. I absolutely love both of those hires. Colin, I'll go to you. Any head coaching hires you want to talk about?
I've got a lot here, a lot of opinions here. Curt Cignetti at Indiana is turning heads, making waves with some of the things he says. But the deal is he's going to back it up completely. The Hoosiers, they won the portal in some situations. Somehow they have NIL money. They're luring some kids in. Everybody's behind Cignetti here doing this. And, don't sleep on James Madison, the team that he left. Bob Chesney left Assumption after having 2 11-win seasons. He goes to Holy Cross, turning heads last year in some FBS games, and they produced 10 and 12-win seasons before Bob Chesney moved up to JMU. So don't take your eyes off either of those situations.
Yeah, Indiana, really intriguing team this year. Cignetti had a ton of success, hell of a coach. But you see this in college basketball too. There's a lot of teams in college football this year and you see this when a new coach comes in from the group of 5 level, they bring a lot of guys with them from their old team. And you saw this with JMU. I mean, I think he brought 10, 11 guys from that JMU team, some ODU guys as well. Kids with all conference accolades that have experience, but how do they translate to the next level, to the Big Ten, right? College basketball, you'll see a kid who went off at Northern Colorado all the time. And sometimes it works out like Connect, but sometimes, more oftentimes than not, it doesn't work out. Trying to figure that out, one of the biggest things that I work on in the offseason. Brett, any head coaching hire you want to talk about?
You stole it, Stuck. Mike Elko. You're right. Everything you said is dead on. He's going to be a calming influence to that program. He was a defensive coordinator. He knows how the school operates. Anybody that can go 16-9 at Duke is going to be successful. And yeah, they open with Notre Dame. If they win that game, this could be a huge year in his debut for the Aggies.
Yep. And then
let's get some negativity on this podcast, though. Tony Sanchez. Tony Sanchez is now at New Mexico State. I mean, after what happened at UNLV was just a complete disaster, and you're trying to follow Jerry Kill and Diego Pavia. Ooh, New Mexico State, no thank you. So that's one of them that just really opened up my eyes. Now, on a positive note, there's no way we're getting out of this podcast.
New Mexico State under, I agree.
There's no way we're leaving this podcast unless we mention that Sean Lewis is now Aztec fast at San Diego State, and the overs that everybody likes to troll me on. We are back, baby.
Oh boy. I was thinking you were going to go contrarian, and now you're going to go San Diego State. Their defense could be
horrible.
A mess. Their punting is going to take a big step back. Their kickoff unit could be bad, and they're going to go really fast on offense.
Stuck, and you were talking about the portal. San Diego State lost 3 starting offensive linemen to Power 4 programs in the offseason.
Yep. And finally, we'll close out with thoughts on a coordinator. I'm going to go off the beaten path here and I'm going to mention. I don't know if his name is pronounced. Probably should know this, but I think it's Cronic, but maybe it's Cronic. But I think it's Cronic. Drew Cronic, who's hired as the offensive coordinator at Navy. I am fascinated to see this offense. They kind of went away from the triple option. Now they're going to. Everyone that listens to this podcast knows I love service academies and the triple option. They're going to the Delaware Wing T, which, believe it or not, was actually originated in Maine, but it was ran at University of Delaware for like 50 years. And Cronic, his dad, was coached this forever. And he's going to marry, kind of the wing T. It's kind of like marrying the spread option with the triple option. I am fascinated to see how it goes. I know a lot about that offense, and I'm curious to see how it all works out. So I'm glad that I wish, like you said, Kennesaw State was running the triple. Ken went out and took the head coaching job at San Jose State. They're not going to run the triple.
Yeah.
Need more triple options, especially as these teams fall behind in talent. That is how you equalize. Team triple option. But I'm really fascinated to see how this Navy offense looks. The one thing that I do hate for Navy, this is getting a little in the weeds, but so they're going to have this new looking offense. I think in the spring they said they only installed like 25% of it. And these teams, they don't really show much in their spring games anyway. But Navy starts out with Bucknell at home and then Temple at home. Temple is dreadful. So, like, I would, from a Navy, if I was a fan of Navy, I would want them to play like a really good opponent on their schedule early, right? Because you have this element of surprise. So maybe they just hold stuff back against these, but it's still a service game. You could lose to anybody. So I don't think the schedule worked in their favor with unveiling this new offense, but more on Navy later. Colin, any coordinator you want to mention?
Yeah, let's get negative on this podcast. Walt Bell is the offensive coordinator for Western Michigan. Where has he ever worked out? I think he was essentially chased out of town at Florida State. I think he almost got in a fist fight with a player at UMass. It didn't go well at Indiana. So if you're looking for points at Western Michigan, I don't think we're going to get it there. I still don't know how.
By the way, I'm started to do my Mac work. I'm considering Western Michigan futures. I have all my notes from Western Michigan, which are like 5 pages, and at the end, I just said. So I have them considered. Well, I said I no joke. I've written but Walt Bell. So like I could just end up keeping me off them. But the Broncos are under consideration. Walt Bell is definitely a potential hurdle that I have to get over.
Yeah, big hurdle. 6-foot hurdle. So I think on a positive note, quietly, Ryan Gunderson being the offensive coordinator at Oregon State is a great hire. When he was hired as quarterback coach at UCLA, all of a sudden Dorian Thompson-Robinson completely trimmed down all his turnover-worthy plays. He is a great quarterback coach. I think he's a good addition for Oregon State. And, you know, from the defensive side, D'Anton Lynn is going to take a USC defense that was horrific in tackling, one of the worst in the nation. If he gets them to mid FBS 75, 80th ranking, that's going to be huge for USC. Just to line up correctly and tackle is going to help that defense tremendously. And then, you know, I'll go big here. Alabama getting Kane Wommack. What a superb hire. Shuts down Oklahoma State last year. Like, South Alabama is a serious problem for some teams. He's a recruiting genius. That was a great hire. And oh, by the way, don't forget Geoff, our friend Geoff Collins. He's back. He's now the defensive coordinator for Mac Brown. That's one to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Kalen DeBoer, great hire, and don't sleep on him. Don't just write off Alabama. All that guy does is cover and exceed expectations. Brett, any coordinator you want to mention?
Yeah, I've got 3 of them real quick. Colin mentioned one. They're all from the Big Ten. 14 of the 18 Big Ten teams either have a new offensive or defensive coordinator. Obviously, Alex Grinch is gone at USC. Lynn and Henderson replace him. Ohio State, Chip Kelly. Goes from UCLA head coach to now he's back working with Ryan Day. He coached Ryan Day when Chip Kelly was at New Hampshire. I actually covered a game when he was an offensive coordinator against, drum roll, of course, you know, USF. So that would Ken Niumatalolo told me the other day that he wasn't surprised Kelly left UCLA. He wants to coach. He called him a football savant. Obviously, all the pressure in the world. You're talking about James Franklin pressure. How about Ryan Day pressure? So how will Chip Kelly do? And guys, how could, you know, I thought you guys were like football insiders. You guys know anything. How did you miss this one? Tim Lester is the new offensive coordinator at Iowa.
I was going to bring
what is going to happen with the Hawkeyes offense with no more Brian Ferentz?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. The Big Ten, it's obviously very top heavy, as it usually is, but there are fascinating storylines for almost every team. We mentioned Indiana. What will Cignetti do with all the transfers he brought in? And also, finally, not a completely oppressive schedule with the new Big Ten. Same with Rutgers. I don't know if they have the quarterback, but Rutgers finally doesn't have like the the fourth hardest schedule in the country, where they have a guaranteed 4 or 5 losses. And then the coordinators. What will USC look like with a much better defensive coordinator? What will they look like on that side of the ball? And what will Iowa look like in the post-Ferentz era? Will Kirk let them cook? Is it going to be the same Iowa? But yeah, those are two teams. You look over the past few years, what has held back Iowa? It's been their offense. You go out and make an offensive coordinator change finally. And what has held back USC? It's been their defense. You go out and you finally get rid of Grinch and bring in a really good one in Lynn. Those are two fascinating storylines. So I'm glad you brought those up. Colin, any final thoughts on those?
I don't agree with the fact Sonny Dykes hired Andy Avalos to come in to be the defensive coordinator after dismissing Joe Gillespie. We love Joe Gillespie. We love the 3-3-5. Didn't get it done last year. Sonny let him go. Andy Avalos comes in, runs a strict 4-2-5. They hired him to change to a 4-man front, and then Demonic Williams, nose tackle, one of the best, I'd say one of the best in the nation, hit the portal, left TCU, and he's now at OU. And Avalos is going to stick with a 4-man front. I'm not sure that they have the depth to pull that off. So that one really has me shaking or scratching my head. And then I think the hot name in the market that nobody's talking about is Sheil Wood. He was a Tulane defensive coordinator, had some stops before that where he's extremely successful. Willie Fritz thinks that he's going to be a head coach very soon and that he is an all-star when it comes to defensive coordinators. So I would keep that in mind. And then finally, if Matt Wells getting the co-position at Kansas State is a great thing for Avery Johnson at quarterback. Matt Wells was responsible for Jordan Love 2018 at Utah State and him busting onto the scene. And if you need any proof that Matt Wells is that good, look at Jordan Love's numbers 2019 at Utah State. They were horrendous. And that Matt Wells has a big track record. Last one I'll say is in your backyard. I think the hire of Bush Hamden at Kentucky was fantastic. He did not fit at Boise. He likes a slow developing type offensive play set. He's not all about tempo. This is a perfect offense for Kentucky and what they want to do. It wasn't for Boise.
Love it. All right. Seems like a good place to stop. And on July 12th in the evening, someone's either listening into our podcast or producers are hitting the market. UTSA steaming out a little bit against Kennesaw State on July 12th for week 1. Love to see it. All right, that'll do it for us. So good to be back. Can't wait to grind another college football season with you gentlemen and all of you out there. Voicemails will be back. And like I mentioned before, we have conference betting previews for every conference coming up at the end of this month. I'll tweet out that exact schedule, but we will give you your full dose of college football content leading all the way up until week 0, then throughout the year. Like I mentioned before, group of 5 guys, they'll have their kickoff episode next Monday. Make sure you subscribe, unsubscribe, subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. It's good to be back. Leave a review, 5-star review. Part 2 out now. Make sure you check it out. We'll talk a little hype, buying and selling, some win totals, futures we potentially like, some Heisman, and just whet your appetite for this upcoming college football season. Can't wait. Catch y'all later. Cheers.